Have you ever wondered why? Every year during Easter, millions of people rush to buy chocolate eggs and decorate their homes with smiling bunnies. Do these popular symbols have any real connection to the resurrection of Christ? Or do they carry a much older and entirely pagan past? Get ready, because today we are going to delve into a fascinating journey through the hidden origins of Easter. From the sacred forests where the goddess of fertility Eostre was worshipped, through the ancient rituals of the spring equinox, to the impressive fusion between pagan traditions and the message of the resurrection of Christ. You will discover how the simple egg, which seems so innocent, carries a meaning that spans millennia, and how the rabbit, a symbol of fertility, jumped from pagan festivals straight to the center of the modern celebration. But it doesn't stop there. We will reveal how the revolution of commerce transformed Easter into a consumer spectacle, overshadowing its true spiritual essence. And most importantly, let's rekindle the flame of the true meaning of Christian Easter, the victory over death and the promise of eternal life in Christ. So stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover today could change the way you view this celebration forever. And don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with the people you love. They also need to know the truth behind Easter. Let's get started. Ancient origins of pagan Easter. Imagine a world without chocolate, cute bunnies, or shop windows filled with shiny eggs. Now go back even further, long before Christianity, before Rome even erected its colossal columns. Back then, people looked to the sky with awe and wonder, searching for the secrets of life and death in the cycles of nature. Spring was a sacred event. After months of cold and darkness, the earth would breathe again, blossoming in bright colors, rivers would swell, and animals would come out of hiding. For ancient people, this wasn't just a change in the weather, it was a sign from the gods. Something beyond human comprehension was happening, a rebirth that needed to be celebrated. The Babylonians, for example, had Ishtar, the goddess of fertility and love. The Egyptians worshipped Osiris, who died and was reborn. The Celts revered solar festivals, and the Germans honored a deity whose name may sound familiar. For among the peoples of the north, one goddess stood out in this celebration of rebirth. And this is where the mystery begins to connect with modern Easter, the cult of the goddess Eostre. In the heart of the ancient European forests, where the cold of winter gave way to the vibrant green of spring, the Germanic people gathered to celebrate a mystical rebirth. They lit bonfires, made offerings, and sang chants under the moonlight. But none of this was by chance. These celebrations were dedicated to a goddess shrouded in mystery, Eostre. Her name whispered in the northern winds, echoing between the tree trunks and along the banks of icy rivers. She was the guardian of fertility, light, and new beginnings. Her festival took place precisely on the spring equinox, when day and night finally came into balance. For her followers, this was the perfect time to call for prosperity, abundance, and renewal. Eostre did not just symbolize the changing of the seasons. She was the very embodiment of this eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Every spring, it was believed that she would pass through the earth, bringing with her a magical rebirth, a gift from nature to mankind. And wherever she walked, life flourished. But there was something peculiar about this goddess, a curious detail that was carried through the centuries, crossing religions and becoming one of the most famous symbols of modern Easter. Something small, agile, and full of meaning. Something that hopped around the goddess and left a trail of mystery. Spring equinox and pagan festivals. In those days, the sky was a sacred clock. Men and women watched the stars closely, waiting for the exact moment when the darkness of winter would give way to the light of spring. And when that day arrived, something magical happened. Night and day became equal, balancing each other in perfect harmony. This was the spring equinox, an event so powerful that many cultures in different parts of the world built temples and monuments just to mark it. The Celtic Druids celebrated this day on top of sacred hills, lighting bonfires and performing rituals to ensure a prosperous year. In ancient Egypt, the equinox coincided with festivals in honor of Osiris, the god who died and was reborn. In Persia, Nowruz, the Persian New Year, was a tribute to the rebirth of the earth. But among the Germanic peoples, this date was linked to Eostre, the goddess of spring, whose presence was symbolized by the arrival of flowers, the return of animals, and by one creature in particular. The ancients believed that Eostre had a special messenger, a being who represented fertility and the abundance of life. And this creature didn't just symbolize the arrival of spring, it would also leave its mark on history, leaping from pagan forests to modern homes carrying a symbolism that few know about. The symbolism of the egg in antiquity. Imagine an object so simple, so common, that it goes unnoticed in everyday life. But now look again. Inside it lies an ancient mystery, the promise of life, the power of creation, an entire universe waiting to be born. Since the earliest times, different civilizations have regarded the egg as a sacred symbol, an amulet of rebirth. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that the world had emerged from a cosmic egg, broken by the gods to free creation. The Persians exchanged colored eggs at the festival of Nowruz, celebrating the arrival of spring. The Romans buried eggs under crops to ensure good harvests. Even the first Christians of the East used eggs dyed red to represent the blood of Christ and the resurrection. But among the Germanic peoples, the egg had an even deeper meaning. It was linked to Eostre, the goddess of fertility, as a gift to the earth, a symbol of the awakening of nature. It was said that wherever the goddess passed, eggs would mysteriously appear on the ground as a sign of renewal. But something curious happened. Over time, this ancient tradition began to mix with another figure, an agile creature, with alert eyes and always ready to flee at the slightest sign of danger. An animal that, like the egg, carried a powerful symbolism, and that unexpectedly would become one of the most famous icons of modern Easter, the rabbit and its connection to fertility. In the lush green fields of ancient lands, where the morning mist dissolved under the first rays of sunlight, a small creature hopped among the leaves, agile and silent. Its gaze was alert, its senses sharp. It knew it needed to always be on the move because its survival depended on it. But this animal was not just an ordinary inhabitant of the forest, it carried a much deeper meaning. The rabbit has always been a symbol of fertility. Its incredible reproductive capacity made it a sacred figure in several cultures. In Egypt, it represented the eternal cycle of life. Among the Celts, it was associated with the moon, as they believed that its behavior changed according to the lunar phases. And in the cult of the goddess Eostre, it was her messenger, a sacred being who announced the arrival of spring. But there is something even more intriguing in this story. Over time, the rabbit stopped being just a symbol of fertility and began to carry on a new tradition. It became responsible for something mysterious, a ritual that would cross centuries and continents. This small animal began to be associated with a curious custom, the delivery of eggs, symbols of rebirth and renewal. And so, in an almost imperceptible process, two ancient traditions intertwined, the egg and the rabbit, forming a combination that, centuries later, would become the trademark of modern Easter. But how did this happen? Who was responsible for uniting these two symbols? The answer to this mystery leads us to a fascinating story where ancient rituals were absorbed, modified, and reinterpreted over time. The transformation of tradition. From paganism to Christianity, symbols are like underground rivers. They run through centuries, shape cultures, and often reach us without us realizing their true origins. The egg and the rabbit, once associated with pagan festivals of fertility and the rebirth of the earth, began to follow an unexpected path when they encountered the rise of Christianity. As the Christian faith spread throughout Europe, ancient pagan festivals did not disappear immediately. On the contrary, many of their traditions were reinterpreted, incorporated with a new meaning. The spring equinox, once an event dedicated to Eostre, now merged with the most important celebration of Christianity, the resurrection of Christ. But folk customs are hard to erase. People continued to celebrate the arrival of spring with the same symbols as before, and so it was that the egg, once an icon of natural rebirth, came to represent the empty tomb of Christ and the promise of eternal life. The rabbit, a messenger of fertility and abundance, remained in the popular imagination as a symbol of renewal, even though its connection with Christianity was never made official. The mix was ready. But there was one detail missing, an element that would transform these ancient symbols into something sweet, irresistible, and marketable. Something that would come centuries later and that would cause the true origin of this tradition to be completely forgotten. The birth of the chocolate egg. Imagine a child in medieval times holding a carefully hand-painted egg like a small treasure. This custom was already common in Europe, where eggs were dyed red to symbolize the blood of Christ and exchanged as a sign of blessing and renewal. But something unexpected happened when this tradition encountered an ingredient that would change the history of Easter forever: chocolate. When Spanish conquistadors brought cocoa from the Americas to Europe in the 16th century, no one imagined that this bitter and exotic bean would one day become one of the most coveted products in the world. Chocolate gradually gained popularity among the nobility, but it was only in the 19th century, with advances in sugar production, that it became accessible to the masses. And it was at this moment that someone had a brilliant idea. What if, instead of painted chicken eggs, eggs were made entirely of chocolate? The first chocolate eggs appeared in France and Germany, hand-molded and filled with small gifts. This innovation quickly conquered Europe and became the new Easter tradition. But the story didn't stop there. Over time, the original symbolism of the egg began to fade, and Easter became increasingly associated with sweetness and consumption. The market realized the lucrative potential of this new tradition, and what was once a symbol of fertility or resurrection was transformed into a huge commercial phenomenon. But there was still one character in this story who would also be reinvented, gaining a new identity, far removed from its pagan origins. The reinvention of the Easter bunny. Somewhere along the line, between the sacred groves of ancient Germanic tribes and the glittering shelves of modern stores, Eostre's messenger underwent an unexpected transformation. The little rabbit, once a symbol of fertility and renewal, left the fields and entered the imagination of children, taking on a new role, one that would make him leap straight into popular culture. It was in 17th century Germany that a curious story emerged. The legend of the Osterhase, the Easter bunny, who visited children on the eve of the celebration to hide colored eggs in gardens and inside homes. This charming figure quickly spread, traveling with German immigrants to the United States in the 18th century, where he found fertile soil to grow. There, he not only became a beloved character, but also took on new characteristics. Instead of just plain eggs, the bunny began bringing eggs filled with sweets and small gifts. Chocolate factories, always alert to opportunities, saw this as a perfect way to transform the tradition into a consumer phenomenon. Soon, the Easter bunny was no longer just a folk legend. It had become a brand, a symbol of the modern holiday. But there was something curious about this process. While chocolate eggs and bunnies filled shop windows and aroused children's desires, the true essence of Christian Easter began to be lost amid the glitter of colorful packaging. The meaning of resurrection, sacrifice, and redemption were being overshadowed by the spectacle of consumerism. But how did this happen? How did such a sacred event become a celebration increasingly distant from its spiritual roots? To understand this change, we need to go back in time and observe the exact moment when Easter began to be shaped by commerce. The commercialization of Easter, when faith became a market. Once upon a time, it was a sacred celebration marked by silence and contemplation. Christians gathered at dawn to commemorate a miracle, the victory over death, the promise of redemption. But little by little, something began to change. The sacred met commerce, and the meaning of Easter began to be packaged, decorated and sold. In the 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution, small confectionaries gave way to large factories, which saw Easter as an irresistible opportunity. Companies such as Lindt, Cadbury and Nestlé began to produce chocolate eggs on a large scale, transforming a symbol of rebirth into a highly profitable product. The Easter bunny, once a folkloric figure, began to appear in advertisements, enchanting children and winning over entire families. But the real turning point came in the 20th century, when advertising campaigns began to reconfigure the Easter narrative. What was once a celebration of the resurrection became a consumer day, with supermarkets displaying shelves full of chocolates, toys, and themed gifts. The Christian tradition was still present, but each year it became more evident that commerce had taken over. And so, the Easter we know today began to take shape, a mix of faith and commerce, where the sacred and the profane walk side by side. But what really happened to the essence of this day? How did the celebration of Christ's resurrection become overshadowed by shiny packaging and flashy advertisements? To find the answer, we need to go back to the heart of the Christian message and recover the true meaning of this date. The true meaning of Easter, much more than chocolate. Amid shelves crammed with chocolate eggs and colorful bunnies, few ask themselves, what are we really celebrating? Easter did not begin in chocolate factories, nor was it born from marketing strategies. Its meaning goes back to an event that changed the history of humanity, a sacrifice, a cross, and an empty tomb. The word Easter comes from the Hebrew Pesach, which means passage. In the Old Testament, the Hebrews celebrated Easter as the liberation from Egypt, a sign of God's covenant with his people. But in the New Testament, Easter takes on a new and definitive meaning. Jesus Christ becomes the Passover lamb, the one who sheds his blood to save humanity from sin and death. There are no bunnies in this story. There are no chocolate eggs. There is only a cross, a tomb, and a promise. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. John 11:25. This is the true Easter, the triumph over death, the victory of divine love over sin. But how did this powerful message get sidelined? How did the greatest event of the Christian faith get replaced by stuffed rabbits and supermarket sales? To understand this, we need to look at modern society and how spiritual traditions have been diluted amid secularism and rampant consumerism. Spiritual oblivion. When Easter became just a holiday, we walk down streets lit up by flashy storefronts where chocolate eggs compete with plush bunnies and gold packaging. Advertisements display slogans like, "Enjoy Easter, unmissable discounts," but something is missing. Something essential has been left behind. In the early centuries of Christianity, Easter was the heart of the faith. Christians fasted, prayed, and prepared for this day as a time of profound transformation. The event of the resurrection was not just remembered, it was lived. But as the centuries passed, culture changed. Modernity brought with it secularism, and what was once a time of reflection became just another holiday on the calendar. Today, how many people really know what they are celebrating? For many, Easter is reduced to a family meal, gifts, and chocolates. The message of Christ has been silenced, drowned out by the noise of consumerism. The fast-paced and distracted modern world seems to have no time for contemplation. Spirituality has been pushed to the sidelines, while the spectacle of commerce has taken center stage. But is this change irreversible? Can the true meaning of Easter be rediscovered? To find the answer, we need to look at an interesting phenomenon that has been happening in recent years. A quiet, spiritual awakening, a search for something that consumerism has never been able to offer. Spiritual awakening. the search for what consumption cannot offer. Amidst the hustle and bustle of crowded shopping malls and tables laden with chocolate, something curious is happening. Many people are beginning to feel that something is missing, an emptiness that gifts cannot fill, a longing that consumption cannot satisfy. It is as if, deep within the soul, something is calling, a distant echo of the true Easter, the one that cannot be bought. The modern world offers distractions, entertainment, and instant pleasures, but it cannot answer the deepest questions. What is the purpose of life? Where do we go after death? Is there redemption for our mistakes? These questions, which the Christian faith has always addressed, continue to pulsate in the human heart, waiting for an answer that marketing can never provide. And it is in this scenario that a silent movement begins to grow. More and more people, tired of superficiality, are beginning to seek the true meaning of Easter. Some rediscover the importance of prayer, others turn to the Bible, and there are those who, along the way, find a faith they never imagined they had. But this search does not happen by chance. There is a reason why, even after centuries of secularization, the Christian Easter lives on. There is a reason why this story cannot be erased or replaced. To understand this, we need to go back to the origins of Christianity and the impact of the resurrection on humanity. The impact of the resurrection, the event that changed history. Picture the scene. A small tomb carved into the rock, guarded by Roman soldiers. 3 days earlier, the one called the Son of God had been brutally crucified. His followers were scattered, his enemies convinced of his defeat. It seemed all over. But then, something happened. At dawn on the third day, the impossible happened. The tomb was empty. The guards, terrified, could not explain. The religious leaders were in despair. The women who went to the tomb encountered an angel who declared, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" Luke 24:5. The resurrection of Christ was not just a religious event, it was a watershed in human history. His disciples, once fearful, became fearless. Christianity, which could have been wiped out in a few decades, spread across the world, transforming cultures, challenging empires, and changing lives. The cross, once a symbol of shame and defeat, has become humanity's greatest icon of hope. But how does an event from 2,000 years ago still have power today? How does this resurrection continue to impact millions of lives around the world? The answer lies in those who have experienced this transformation firsthand, people whose lives have been completely changed by Christ. And among these testimonies, some have become true landmarks in history, testimonies that echo through history when the resurrection transforms lives. Imagine Saul of Tarsus, a relentless persecutor of Christians, someone who did everything he could to eradicate this nascent faith. He was feared, respected, and convinced that he was right. But then, on the road to Damascus, something happened. A bright light surrounded him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice that changed his life forever. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Acts 9:4. The one who was an enemy of the cross became one of its greatest defenders. Saul became Paul, the apostle to the nations, spreading the message of the resurrection throughout the known world. From persecutor, he became persecuted. From accuser, he became a witness. And he was not the only one. Over the centuries, kings, slaves, intellectuals, and simple peasants had their lives completely transformed by this same resurrected Christ. Easter was not just an ancient story. It was a living reality, a power that spanned generations and continued to transform hearts. But if the resurrection is so powerful, why do so many today fail to see its importance? What happened to obscure this truth? To understand this, we need to look at how the modern world has moved away from this message and replaced faith with materialism and skepticism. The modern world and the loss of faith. When materialism replaces the sacred. There was a time when church bells marked the rhythm of life. Easter was no ordinary holiday. It was the center of existence, a reminder of God's purpose in human history. But times have changed. Progress has brought technological advances, comfort, speed, and little by little, something has been left behind. Today, faith seems to have been pushed to the corners of society. Screens glow with non-stop entertainment, grocery store shelves are filled with chocolate eggs, and churches that once teemed with worshippers now often stand empty. The modern world has replaced contemplation with distraction, hope with anxiety, the sacred with the superficial, and the result? A society full of resources but starved of purpose. People who have it all but feel empty. The pursuit of happiness has become a rat race, but the finish line never seems to be reached, because what is missing cannot be bought, cannot be mass-produced. It can only be found in something beyond this world. But is all lost? Can the faith that once sustained entire civilizations be rediscovered? The answer may lie where we least expect it, in those who, against all odds, continue to carry this living flame. The keepers of the flame, those who never forsake the truth. In a world where faith seems to have been traded for convenience, where traditions are diluted and reshaped to suit the tastes of the moment, there are still those who refuse to forget. Monasteries hidden in the mountains, small communities of believers, families who, generation after generation, preserve the truth of the Christian Easter as a priceless treasure. In the catacombs of Rome, in the deserts of Egypt, in the monasteries of the Greek hills, Easter has never lost its true meaning. For these keepers of the faith, the resurrection is not an abstract concept, it is a living reality, transforming hearts and minds. They are not seduced by the bright lights of consumerism. They know that the world tries to bury the truth under layers of distraction, but the truth always finds a way to resurface. And this resistance is not new. Since the first centuries, the Christian faith has faced hostile empires, bloody persecutions, and relentless attempts to erase it from history. But something curious has always happened. The more they tried to silence it, the stronger it became. The blood of the martyrs, Tertullian said, is the seed of the church. But who are these people today? Who are those who, in the 21st century, still live Easter as in ancient times? To find out, we need to look at those who defy modern culture and insist on living an authentic faith, even when it means swimming against the tide, swimming against the current, Christians who will not bow to the world's culture. They don't have the spotlight on them. They don't occupy the big media stages, nor do they follow the passing trends of society. But their presence is undeniable. They are the ones who, even surrounded by a world that ridicules faith, refuse to bend the knee to what is fleeting. While many celebrate Easter as a commercial holiday, they live it as a sacred mystery. For them, the resurrection is not just a story, it is the key to understanding all of existence. They fast when the world gives in to excess. They retreat to prayer when others run after distractions. And against all odds, they find a peace that no one can steal. But what makes these people so different? How do they maintain their faith unwaveringly, while so many around them give up? The answer lies in something that goes beyond doctrine and ritual, something that the early Christians knew well, an invisible but real power that sustains those who do not abandon the truth. And this power, which spans centuries and transforms lives, is still present today. But where can we find it? How can we access it in a world that does everything it can to keep us away from it? To understand this, we need to look at what happens when Easter is not just celebrated, but truly lived. When Easter is lived, the power that transforms hearts. Imagine a man who has spent years lost in his own choices. He has had money, he has experienced the pleasures that the world offers, he has tried to fill the emptiness he felt in every possible way, but nothing worked. The shine of material things always disappeared too quickly. Happiness never lasted. Then, one day, he enters a church almost by chance. The lit candles, the smell of incense, the soft chants. Everything seems different from what he knows. Something inside him stirs. That night, for the first time in years, he kneels. For the first time, he feels a weight being lifted from his shoulders. The true Easter is not an external event. It is an internal, profound experience capable of changing a life forever. And those who live it, who pass from death to life, are never the same again. The fear of death disappears because they know that death does not have the final word. The sadness of the world loses its hold because there is something much greater waiting. And that is why, throughout the centuries, men and women have left everything behind and followed this truth. But what happens when this truth clashes with a world that rejects its own salvation? What happens when those who have experienced the resurrection encounter a system that tries at all costs to silence what they carry within them? To answer this, we need to look back to the times of persecution, when being a Christian meant risking everything. Easter, under persecution, when faith costs one's life. The night was cold in the catacombs of Rome. A group of Christians gathered in silence, holding oil lamps that cast flickering shadows on the stone walls. Outside, the empire considered them criminals. Simply choosing to celebrate Easter could cost them their lives. But here, hidden from the world, they did not tremble with fear. On the contrary, their eyes shone with a hope that not even Caesar's power could extinguish. They knew they were participating in something eternal, something that no decree, no prison, and no sword could destroy. Because the one who conquered death was with them. Centuries passed, but persecution never disappeared. From the martyrs of ancient Rome to the Christians of the Soviet Union, China, and the Middle East, history repeated itself. Those who refused to betray the truth paid the highest price. But what no one could understand was how, even in the face of torture and death, they did not give up. What sustained them? What invisible force ensured that, generation after generation, there were those willing to give up everything for their faith? Perhaps the answer lies in what the early Christians knew, something the modern world has forgotten. Something that explains why Easter is not just a historical event, but a living reality. Something that brings us to the last and most profound mystery, the ultimate mystery. The true Easter never dies. The difference between pagan Easter and Christian Easter is not just in the symbols, but in the very meaning of existence. On one side, we have chocolate eggs and bunnies, images of fertility, natural cycles, and passing festivities that hark back to ancient cults, where life was seen as an eternal new beginning with no final purpose. On the other side, we have the Lamb who was slain and resurrected, breaking this cycle and offering something infinitely greater, the definitive victory over death. Christian Easter does not celebrate only biological life, it celebrates eternal life. It does not revolve around forgotten gods and seasonal feasts, but around the sacrifice of Christ, the only one capable of redeeming the world. What is sold to us today as Easter is not the true Easter. It is a shadow, a distraction. What began as a cosmic event that divided history and redefined the destiny of humanity has been transformed into commerce and entertainment. But the truth cannot be erased. Now that you know this story, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with those you love so that more people can become aware of the reality of Easter. Like this video, follow the channel and help this message reach more hearts. Because as long as there are people who remember, the true Easter will never be forgotten.